Momentarily. All right, I think I just got the notification that this meeting is being live streamed. So I think that's my indication to start. Sweet. So welcome back, everyone. If you've been following Digital Inclusion Week 2022, this is talk number 5. We are doing 6 workshops this year as opposed to 5. Last night, we had Cam and Tracy Hughes from C-Test Labs talk robotics. Today, we have Amazon AWS security consultant Wes Stanton. He's going to be talking about speed running, cybersecurity exploits, and everything in between. If you are watching this in the future as an archived video, feel free to reach out anyways in the comments, or you can still email me at anthony@oakhillcollaborative.org with any questions that you have for him, and I'll make sure that they were forwarded along. The benefits of everyone attending either virtually or in person, what's up, is that you get to ask your questions on stream. So as he's going through his topic, try to generate those in your mind, as it's not every day you get to ask Amazon rep security questions. So that's enough out of me. I'm going to go ahead and mute. We're live, and you have the floor, Wes.
Sounds great. Thanks, Anthony. So let me share my screen here. 1 second. There we go. Should be able to see my screen now. So I guess welcome to this talk for Oak Hill Collaborative I'm doing. My name is Wesley Stanton. I'm going to be talking about security, speedrunning, and arbitrary code execution. So we're going to go through what kind of all these things are. And we'll also be jumping in and out of the slideshow a little bit too, because I have a few things I'd like to show, I guess, outside the slideshow to give kind of real world examples. So who am I? My name is Wesley Stanton. I am a YSU alumni. I went to Youngstown State University. I was the president of the Ethical Hacking Association there for a bit. Not sure if they're still quite around, but when I was there as president, I have about 6 years worth of experience for network security and adversarial engineering. That's between large companies, Fortune 500 companies for both those as well. Also have web app penetration tester certification from SANS, from GIAC. And yeah, so we'll jump right into this. So I guess the first question is, what is arbitrary code execution? So normally when you're thinking about going to a website, you go to a website, you type into a box, whatever you want to search or whatever you want to do, and the website will respond back to you. And those things are normally programmed into the web app with what it should respond back and how it should respond back. But what arbitrary code execution allows you to do is make the server return stuff it's not supposed to normally. So arbitrary code execution allows you to normally, it's by means of some sort of injection. So injecting code into a search bar or injecting code into some sort of web request and getting the web server to respond with things that it normally shouldn't respond with, or even potentially saving stuff onto the web server and getting the web server to execute things on your behalf. So there's 2 different types of arbitrary code execution that I normally go over. And real quick, if you're familiar with like cross-site scripting and remote code execution, those are all kind of under the umbrella of arbitrary code execution. So when you do arbitrary code execution, it's just executing something that a server shouldn't be executing. And however you do that, it's your choice. But these are kind of the 2 main methods that people, or that those things fall into. One is reflected. So reflected is when you do some sort of arbitrary code execution and the website reflects back to you. Nothing is stored on the server. Nothing is saved there, but it's something that you can input into the website and get it to reflect back to you anything. So you could think like an alert pop-up box. You could even potentially load completely different pages within a page and get complicated stuff like that. But yeah, it's normally a one-to-one thing. It doesn't store anything on the server. And usually to get someone to do that, you have to like send them a big nasty URL that they have to run to get the website to do it on their side. Whereas a stored arbitrary code execution is where you're able to write and save code to a server and then have that server reflect back to you. So it would be actually changing things on the server. And not only they reflect it back to you, but anyone who goes to the site now will have that same thing showing as well. So that's really the big difference between the two types of arbitrary code execution. So I'm going to jump out of the slideshow here real quick. So this is an example right here of a what's called a script tag, and these are normally used when we're testing for some sort of arbitrary code execution or cross-site scripting or injection type deal. And normally what they try to do is they try to get a script of some sort to execute, and normally it's an alert because it's an easy pop-up. It doesn't hurt anything, but it lets you show that a website is vulnerable. So to kind of give a quick demo of this, I have this web page here. It's kind of like it's a gamified version of cross-site scripting. I recommend checking it out too. They have multiple different levels. They get generally harder and harder to do, and it's good fun playing around with it. So if I paste that script in there, and I'll go back and look at this real quick. So if you're familiar all with HTML or JavaScript, HTML, normally you can just do a script tag to be able to run JavaScript. And then there is an alert in there that allows you to run that JavaScript. And that's just a common thing in JavaScript is alert to be able to make a pop-up box on the page. So this one here is a little bit obfuscated. And the reason we do that is because sometimes websites will be looking for like a very bare bones basic thing like this. So we mix it up a little bit and add a little bit of stuff in there to make so hopefully the website doesn't recognize it. So if I go over here and first off, I'll just search anything in here. So I'll do like hello. Okay, nothing found for hello, and then testing, nothing found for testing. So nothing's coming up. But if I were to paste that script in there, or that line of HTML that includes a script, and I do search, we now see this little pop-up box come up here. Not sure how easy that is to see over the stream, but if you're familiar with the little pop-up boxes that come up sometimes on web pages, that's what just came up over here, and it says XSS game.appspot.com says, congratulations, you executed an alert. And it says OKIll Collab National Inclusion Week 2022. So just to show a little bit more on that, let me go in and inspect the page here while we're doing this. So I'll go over to network and I'll paste this in here again. And we see it come up here again. And we also see when the page returns, we get this request URL that comes back. So yeah, we could see the code getting executed here. We can actually see it on the network traffic. And then we could technically see it within the page as well too, if I were to dig into the source code of the page while executing this. So that's kind of a nice reflected. So this is nothing stored on the server. It's just something that reflects back. And we'll get to stored in a minute. I have a pretty cool way to show off the stored. So back into the slideshow here. So like I mentioned, some of the reasons why this is bad and why we always look for this in security is arbitrary code execution allows people to manipulate websites, potentially gain footholds into your network. They can even attack your other visitors and other customers, which is a big thing that people don't normally think about. They're like, oh, I am the person getting attacked. Where sometimes, no, you're not the person getting attacked. They just know that you're a big enough company with a lot of customers that they can use you as a method to attack other people. So they will do stuff like that. And it allows people to attack your network as well, not only gain a foothold, but actually attack your network. So to kind of show that real quick, if you look at this picture here, it kind of expanded out on the previous picture that we looked at, where you are using the internet. Say you send an arbitrary code execution into here. Now I have a foothold on this server that I can look at all these other servers with. So if I'm on this web server, I have the potential, I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but I have the potential to be able to pivot and shift left or pivot to another server, or even like a domain controller, which would be really bad, right? Because that's where your keys to your kingdom are normally hold all the user passwords. That's where people authenticate against, is your domain controller. So that's kind of a little bit about arbitrary code execution and how that works. So I guess we'll go into the other half of this real quick, and then I'll relate the two together. So the other half of this is speed running in video games. So this is something that I absolutely love as a security person. Not only because it's fun, it's video games, it's beating them fast, but also there's a lot of very neat security aspects to a lot of the things they do in them. So what is speed running? Speed running is normally just beating a game, usually from start to end, by a specific set of rules. Some of the rules could be like any percent, which is just something like beat the game as fast as possible, get from start game to end game like as fast as you can. There's like 100% category, which is normally different for every game, but it has different rules and stuff. But it's usually like beating a game, but getting all the collectibles in the game, or getting all the extra items in the game, something like that. There's also categories like any percent glitchless, which doesn't use any of the fun glitches that I'm going to talk about, but that's the fun part to me. And there's also things like any percent no, and then a certain glitch, because there could be glitches in the game that are so game breaking that it makes the game just not fun for anyone. A good example is Pokemon Blue for the Game Boy. They normally time that with in-game time. There's like a little timer at the end after you beat it. It says how long it took you to beat the game. Well, you could do a glitch that makes that time always say 0 minutes and 0 seconds and 0 hours. So that's really no fun for anyone to do. So they'll make categories to kind of eliminate that and make it more fun for other people to run. So here's kind of some examples. This is a website called speedrun.com where people like to track their times. And normally what happens is people submit a time with a video, and that video shows them doing their run. And then there's a person on the website who will validate, make sure they followed all the rules, their video is clear, stuff like that, and then put them on the leaderboard. And each leaderboard is normally kind of monitored by their own group. So they pick who monitors it. It's not like speedrun.com has hired people that they do for monitoring all these. Just you make a new game, you make the community, and you have people who are on the community to verify. So this one, for instance, is Super Mario Bros. 3. You can see Super Mario Bros. 3 100% is 1 hour and 9 minutes. And that's beating every single level in the game is 1 hour and 9 minutes for Super Mario Bros. 3. Some that are a bit more fun. If anyone's familiar with Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda, it was normally originally on the N64, but came to other consoles. Right now, the speed run record for any percent is 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So this is a game. If you're not familiar, I'll talk through it here in a bit. I have a short little video I want to play for you guys to show you. I actually downloaded this top player's run to take a look at and kind of review. And that's the other nice thing is they have all the videos on this website to pull up, and you can view how people do it and view their video. So we'll go through that here right now. So I'm going to put this on mute and kind of just talk you through some of this. So we'll just go right to where he starts the game. And if you're not familiar with this game, you are a character named Link. The purpose of the game is to go through as Child Link. You go to like three dungeons as Child Link and grab these things to get what's called the Master Sword. Makes you an adult Link, and then you fight like 8 temples, and then you fight Ganondorf, and you're done. It's a really long game, and if you haven't played it, it's a really good game. It's on a bunch of different consoles. You can even emulate it as well. But here, we could see that he beats it in 3 minutes and 51 seconds. So at the start of the game, he kind of comes out here, goes through this hole in the wall, and this is the normal path to get your first sword, right, in the game. So you go through here, you grab your sword, and then after grabbing your sword, you leave, come out here, and I believe he goes all the way to getting his shield. The shield, you need a certain amount of money to buy. So you go over to the shop here, you buy the shield for so much money. And then after buying the shield, you go you go out, and your first goal is to go to the first dungeon, which is the Deku Tree, which is past this guy. And this guy requires you to have the sword and the shield to go buy him. So you have to have those two items, which is why he picks those up to go buy him. And he's on his way to the first dungeon. We're gonna see that he doesn't go to the first dungeon. He actually doesn't go to any of these dungeons. And this is by means of arbitrary code execution. So you can kind of see he's doing some weird movement right now. And what this movement is doing is setting up all of these attributes in memory. So I'll show you a picture after this, but basically think of memory. It's just like a big block of space, and you have certain things that take up so much space in that memory. And by walking through this area in a certain line and a certain path, you load things into certain spots of memory. So by doing that, he knows where everything is going to be loaded in the memory, which is very important for what he does here. So this is something that's not supposed to be done in the game, which is locking the camera while picking up this rock. And he walks way out of bounds where this rock deloads. When the rock deloads, it allows you to input the code, because the rock is constantly following Link and saying, which way am I pointing? Well, if there's no rock there to know where you're pointing, now you're actually, rather than pointing and updating the data on the rock, you're pointing and updating the data to the actual game itself, which allows you to point to where the ending credits are and get there. And as you see, he dumps like a big bowl of flour on his head after he gets it, because he realized he just got the world record for that, which is super impressive. So like I said, this is a really long game, really cool game, but was beaten in 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So to show you guys what the memory kind of looks like, this is kind of gives a little bit better example, show what I was talking about. So you can see the way he was walking was to load up his memory like this, and walking in that certain way with your camera pointing in a certain direction always make sure that the memory is set up like this. So you have a big storage space, things take up different amounts of space. Link has his pointer to this rock, and once that rock disappears from his hand, he's now pointing to code in memory. And he knows that, okay, when I walk through a plane, it tells me to go to this area, and that's in this spot of code. So if I just write to that spot of code and say, no, send me to the credits, then it will send me right to the credits. So it's kind of a very, very interesting glitch, a way to use arbitrary code execution to beat this game, which is why, like I said, why I love speedrunning. It allows you to show off these kind of cool security things in a very visual way. So this is kind of just a brief picture here, and it's very similar to the previous one I showed because it's the same thing. Whereas users inputting to his controller, which is inputting to the game, and his controller inputs are actually doing the arbitrary code execution. So as you saw me enter in that text into that text box, that was me doing the arbitrary code execution. Rather than entering in text to a text box, he's just putting in different controller inputs to input that code. So yeah, that's a very good example of a reflected arbitrary code execution in a video game. So another thing I want to talk about real quick too, before I show off this next one, is called tool-assisted speedruns. So a tool-assisted speedrun is same thing as a normal speedrun like we just watched, but it's when you have predetermined inputs that do the actual execution for you. So you're not actually putting in the inputs. You have like a preset thing that you've already programmed to run the inputs for you. And you may say, well, that's cheating. And a lot of people say, yeah, it's cheating, but it helps you find out different ways to do things. And it's a whole own category by itself as well in speedrunning, but it allows you to figure out new strats and new tricks and stuff like that. And it lets you create the same conditions every time, lets you do faster inputs than a human can. And yeah, does everything more reliably than a human could input it. So here's another video, and this is a really interesting one, or way about another way that arbitrary code execution is used. So in this video, we're playing Super Mario World. Like I said, real quick to mention too, there's nothing else attached to these consoles other than the controller. These are totally standard, normal consoles that you'd get. a normal standard SNES or an N64 with a controller plugged in. So all of this is done with the controller inputs, which is really cool. This is, like I said, mentioned before, a task. So this allows this guy to basically play back his controller inputs. It's still only a controller in the game console, but he's able to play it back whenever he wants to really kind of demonstrate and show off the coolness of this. So as you can see here, he's doing a lot of weird stuff, a lot of weird pickups and drops. I think most of it's just kind of showing off, to be honest. But in this game, how the arbitrary code execution works is there's different states for Mario, I guess is what you call it. And those states are like small Mario, big Mario, and fire Mario. That's right. The three different power-ups that are in this game, or those three. So it's a 0, a 1, and a 2. Well, in this game, there's ways to break out of that. And that's when the game gets really, really confused. You break out and you go to a Mario state of like 6 or 4, which isn't a normal, it's not like your big Mario or fire Mario. You become this weird state of Mario that allows you to input code using your controller inputs. So as you can see, he did all of that. And now all of those moves were programming the game. And he actually programmed this in the game. So this is running on a real SNES with a real controller attached. No strings attached, no weird computer stuff. This is all in the game, programmed with arbitrary code execution. So it basically allowed him to write his own game within the game, which is really cool, using this glitch. So another really cool example of arbitrary code execution in video games. So if we go on to the next one here, let's see, we'll go on here. Here is one of the last videos I'm going to show, and this is a really unique one, and I wanted to show off too. And how I mentioned earlier, I wanted to show off an instance of stored arbitrary code execution. Well, that's what this kind of is. So what he's doing here is he just did an arbitrary code execution in a Pokemon video game for Game Boy. I believe this was Pokemon Yellow, if I'm not mistaken. But basically what they do is they do a stored arbitrary code execution in this game. Then they pop the game out and pop in another game, and then they execute that code that was stored on the other game. So, sorry, Pokemon Red is what it was. So he pops out Pokemon Red, boots up his other video game here on the Game Boy. That I didn't have it showed here, but that attack was stored in memory. So he was able to basically further exploit the game, which was, where is it here? I missed the time window. Oh, right here. So it allows him to basically exploit this other game here, which is Magi Nation, or some other Game Boy game. But basically allows you to beat another game with a game. So really, really cool arbitrary code execution that's stored in the memory of the Game Boy itself. So really, really neat show there. So go to the next page, kind of showing here how this one works. Like I mentioned, users inputting controls to the game, and he's executing his code on the console. And then the console, when he pops out the game and pops in the other game, he's running that arbitrary code execution when that other game loads. So like I said, really, really cool, cool showing and explanation there. So I guess here we have the two examples that I want to show reflected and stored. The Super Mario one was one that didn't affect the game and was one that was just reflected the one time. If you reboot the game, the glitch is gone and you're in a normal, fresh copy. Whereas the other one I showed with the Pokemon is a stored one that's stored on the device and executes even after you turn it off and put in another game, which is really, really cool. Go here. So there's ways you can use these to like beat games really fast and add stuff to games. But there's other really cool things you could do with arbitrary code execution too, which is access files that were never meant to be accessed in the game. So this is a case here where this guy in Super Mario Bros. Not only does arbitrary code execution, but he uses it to access a an unused level, an unused beta level that the programmers had in the game already. So we'll see in a second here. He's doing things. You see the screen kind of break. You see the background's kind of weird right now. And like I said, this is an unused level from beta. It was on the cartridge. It's not any sort of like new thing that he wrote. That was a level that was on the cartridge. It just wasn't accessible during the regular game. You have to use arbitrary code execution to pull up. So pretty neat thing there. I'll show it back here again. We'll skip back to the level here. Oh, I gotta get past that point. So yeah, you can see, I'll just play a little bit more of it. See this unused level with some weird unused characters, some unused interactions as well in here. Really neat video though. So we'll go to the next one here. So I showed you can kind of show off unused levels. You can add stuff to a game and do a bunch of other things with arbitrary code execution. So this one kind of takes all of those and puts it all into one big thing. So this is a really long video. I'm not going to show the whole video, but I'll skip around through here to kind of show you some really cool highlights of this. So as you can see here, he's setting up the same glitch that we saw earlier with the guy in Ocarina of Time, where he walks over, he picks up one of these rocks, and then he breaks the camera, so the camera's locked over here. So it looks exactly identical to the previous one, and setup's kind of exactly the same, getting ready to perform the glitch. So we will, let's see, go forward a little bit. I'll go to the arbitrary code execution section. And so here we could see a little weirdness happen. So this is, like I said, tool assisted. Part of this is tool assisted, part of this is with the person. This is the tool assisted part. So you see the map constantly popping up and closing. You see Link kind of looking around a whole bunch of places and some weird stuff happening here. So what's going on there is not only one series of arbitrary code execution, but several. So he actually used arbitrary code execution to get a small sliver of memory he was able to write to, use that to get a larger section of memory to write to, and then use that to get an even larger section of memory to write to. So by doing multiple back-to-back code executions, he was able to get basically full control over this video game. And we'll see some cool stuff pop up here too. So one of the things they show off, this isn't inputting anything in the game. This is part of a beta, like a demonstration they showed off. They put a little Star Fox, it's called the R-Wing spaceship, into the game, and they showed it off in the beta version. So that's a pretty cool thing that they pulled out of the code. It was something that was in the code already. It just needed to be pulled out. So they pulled it out with arbitrary code execution. So another thing they pulled out here was they call it a beta Kokiri. So you could see it's just a different looking Kokiri guy. So he looks a little weird, different than normal people. The Kokiri, that's the people that live in the woods in this game. Let's see, let's go to the more interesting things. So here's an interesting part. If anyone's familiar with the video game, you might be familiar with this guy, the Running Man. And the whole thing with the Running Man was he races you back to a bridge and you have to beat him. And well, there's no way for you to beat him. He's always going to beat you. They've even used arbitrary code execution to get there in 0.00 seconds. And even then he still beats you. So what they did was they use arbitrary code execution, and I'll play it from right about here. So this is the bridge you get to. You can see their timer's kind of weird, and that's from keeping it at 0 seconds. It's actually going negative right now, but they're talking to the guy. He says, "What, impossible? I'm the fastest man in Hyrule. How did you get here before I did?" And this was all input via arbitrary code execution. So none of this text is actually in the game. This is all input by, you saw Link looking around and the map popping up and down. It says, "I'll give you a special reward if you could beat him." So you go out here, and not only did they program that text into the game, but they also programmed a full boss fight with him. Let me actually go back a little bit here. I'll keep it right there. So it comes out of the forest area, goes backwards. That's another glitch they do to get a lot of speed going across the ground. Which is another cool thing. Not arbitrary code execution, but still cool. So he goes up here on the hill. He sees this big rupee on there, which is input via. Actually, no, that was in the game. That was a file they pulled out of the game. It explodes, and yeah, I see the running man pop up. So this was all input via arbitrary code execution as well, where they did a whole boss fight with him. This is the only reward cheaters like you get. So he basically calls him a cheater because he made the timer 0 when he got there to beat him in the run, and then he fights you. And like I said, all arbitrary code execution. And then we start getting to the really neat stuff. So let me see. So this, go back, crap. Oh no, I clicked way too many buttons. Let me see, let me go back to this. View slideshow. So we'll go here. So basically it shows off a bunch more glitches that they either pulled out of the game files or they input themselves. And this is something that they input themselves. So this is kind of like what I like to call the pinnacle of arbitrary code execution. So they go here, they find the Triforce in this area that they made up and created via arbitrary code execution, and says your wish has been granted after grabbing the Triforce, and then teleports out of this room. And we'll give it a second here to this area. So this area doesn't exist in the game, was also input during those weird link looking around and the map popping up and closing. And this is a totally custom area that they input during that section. Not only did they input that, but you could see that this is now, in a second here, we no longer have the N64 link. We have the Breath of the Wild link. So that we have a link from a newer game running in Ocarina of Time, which was the N64 title. And this is all, like I mentioned, running in game using just controller inputs, nothing else, nothing special. They were able to bring another character into this game. They actually programmed cell shading too, which is a better way to kind of handle characters on a like lower end console, and do all of this on the N64 on the hardware, which is absolutely insane. So they programmed all these characters, this entire cutscene into the game. And then last but not least, we have one other part here, which I accidentally skipped back, which was really cool. So this was actually the live chat during the screen or during the stream. So the live chat was being pushed in through a controller input and then pull it onto the screen live during the showing. So really, really cool video. And if you have the time, I believe it's like an hour long. I highly, highly recommend this video. It was done at a charity event called SGDQ, which I'll talk about in a minute. But really, really cool video. If you just look up Triforce %, you'll see it. It'll pop up. Cool stuff there. So move on here. Oh, I accidentally exited the slideshow again. So these are some other kind of like weird speedrunning strategies. So that was all arbitrary code execution that I've been talking about up to this point. I just really wanted to give a brief mention to some of these other kind of weird things though that I love seeing. I love seeing kind of off the wall ways that people beat video games. So on the left-hand side, we see Spongebob battle for Bikini Bottom Dirty Disc. So there's actually a glitch found in the game that was very, very hard to reproduce the glitch, but one guy was able to reproduce the glitch really easily for some reason. They don't know why. It almost always worked for him. And they found out that his disc was atrociously dirty. And so people started joking about dirtying their disc and muddying up their disc to actually make the glitch work more often, which does work and worked in the game. And a lot of people did it and still do it to do that run. Another one is the Dragon Quest III hot plate, which I love too, that the game and the memory, you can only perform the glitch when the console is actually physically heated up. So people put the entire console and game onto a hot plate, heat up the console and game, and it allows you to skip a large portion of the game, basically all of the game, actually. You're only like a few minutes into the game where the hot plate, they call it the hot plate strategy, will get you to the end really quick. And the last one that I like to mention was N64 Goldeneye. So the old James Bond game on the N64 with Pierce Brosnan. There's a strategy where there's several different like countdown timers and stuff like that. And if you actually physically disassemble your controller and you push down hard on the chip on the controller, some of the timers won't go down in the game. So by pushing on the board inside the controller, you can manipulate the game and cause certain things to happen, which I thought was totally crazy, but hilarious as well. So those are just other things I like to talk about. But if this talk got you at all interested in security or arbitrary code execution, a few people that I love to shout out, I always shout them out, is Computer File on YouTube, has a really good channel with a bunch of things on it, but specifically Tom Scott's showings on there and Mike Pound, Dr. Mike Pound. They have a lot of good videos on different security topics, arbitrary code execution, password encryption, cross-site scripting, everything you can imagine. They got them on there. And if you sort by top videos, you'll probably see these guys as most of the top ones because they're definitely the most interesting videos. So yeah, if you like to see that stuff, definitely check them out. If you like the speedrunning stuff as well, a few people like to shout out are the Games Done Quick groups. So Games Done Quick is a marathon that's run twice a year, once at the beginning of the year and then once during the summer. Awesome Games Done Quick is the beginning, and then Summer Games Done Quick, obviously the summer. And they're big charity fundraiser events that are week long. So they do a week long stream where they speed run games for an entire week. It's like hundreds of games that they speed run, and they have the people talking and kind of like explaining how they're doing stuff, which is really, really cool. And all the money that gets donated goes to charity, usually like Prevent Cancer or Doctors Without Borders or something like that. But it's all for a great cause. So I love to shout them out as well. So with that, my talk is concluded and finished. I guess, were there any questions? Amp, I don't know. I haven't been watching anything, but I don't know if there's any questions or anything.
All right. So with the talk being done, we're gonna, first of all, round of applause for Wes. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for presenting. We're gonna give a little bit of time for any questions to come through the live chat, if any. I know that I sent that link just about everywhere. So one question that I did have is, and this is just from my own personal experience in data moshing, which is a slang term for breaking files. You actually open up raw information, move things around that you shouldn't, and then watch the pretty colors.
Yep.
Usually done to pictures, music files. Like if you take a picture and you run it through a music editing software, weird things.
Yep.
That being said, nothing I've ever done in data moshing has made anything as coherent as what's been displayed here. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do they make the connection between what inputs are required to perform the exploits that display custom content?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer is exactly what you said. So data moshing is very, very used in the speedrunning community to really break these games apart. So for instance, that Legend of Zelda exploit I showed at the end, what they did to find all those different arbitrary code executions that they had to do one after another, they actually took the game, looked at all of the assembly code, all of the execution that goes on, figured out what pointers went where, messed around with a bunch of things to basically find out the fastest path to get to full compromise. So I guess a little bit more detail about that is, well, I mentioned that they needed to use multiple in a row, which is true, but I guess the reasoning why is because the first arbitrary code execution only lets you write 4 bytes to the game. So you can only write a space of 4 bytes, and you can only use one set of controller inputs once per frame to write that. So you have a really small bandwidth and really slow bandwidth. And that's why they actually use the other arbitrary code execution, because the second one gives you now, I think it's like 8 bytes and allows you to do those 8 bytes, and you're not limited by the frames of the video game. So now you can put a bit more code. And then the third one allows them to do, I think, like a full 32 bytes of input as fast as they want, basically, and allows them to completely overwrite whatever sections of the game that they want and open up a lot of things, which is really cool. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it just kind of sounds like they're opening the floodgates for basically whatever they want to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
By rearranging what arrows point where in the game. I think it's incredibly interesting that they were able to even put their own custom content into the game.
Yeah.
That aside, live attendance. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. I'm curious.
And can you hear him all right from over there?
Yeah.
Right from over there.
All right.
There we go. Hey, so when it comes to like web security stuff, we're talking about cross-site scripting, stuff like that. I'm curious what the current like hot tools are that people are using to actually go in and try to like pen test remote code execution. Like, I'll use like SQL map or stuff like that for SQL injection. I'm wondering if there's anything current right now that people are using to sort of maybe fuzz this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there are 1,000,001 tools out there. As far as web app pen testing goes, which is kind of my bread and butter, what I normally use is a few programs. One is called Zap. I don't know if you've ever heard of OWASP Zap, but basically what it is it's a man-in-the-middle agent for I guess for the people who don't know, it's a man-in-the-middle agent that allows you to intercept your own traffic and kind of replay that traffic with different data sets going across the line. So that's one of the big ones I use. I also use oh crap, what's it called? It's slipping my mind for some reason. I use it all the time. The counterpart to Zap, but the non-free open source one. Anyways, it basically does the same thing. Lets you do that stuff. But yeah, those are the big tools I use. And then there are different plugins and stuff for Zap that allow you to really automate like SQL Map, which is a tool that allows you to try to map out a website's like databases via command injection or code execution. And yeah, Zap really lets you automate that and really build it out. And not only do that, but allow you to automate a lot of your attacks that you would do. So I guess a good example would be, one I actually did pretty recently was I went to a website that had a bunch of different attachments and files, and the file names you could see in the URL bar, it was like file equals 1, file equals 2, file equals 3. It's like, well, I want to see how many of those there are. So I just automate something in Zap to hit as many as I can. And it just hits all of them for me rather than having to manually hit each one of those. So, but yeah, that's what Burp Suite. That's what it's called. Burp Suite is the other one I use. So.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I think a lot of us are we're mesmerized by all of the information that you just went over. Some of us maybe even a little bit more lost than others. And that's okay. That's why this is going to be archived, so you can rewind and watch until it clicks or doesn't. Yep. But I guess one question that's on everyone's mind is, if it's this easy to break a video game and get it to do whatever we want, how safe are our bank accounts?
Yeah. So bank accounts, a little bit different. So it's actually a little bit different with most websites nowadays. It used to be a big thing in the past. Web app pen testing, you break a website, you try to get in, see all the data. Don't get me wrong, that's still a big thing. But now people are saying, I could do all that work, or I could just attack the weakest link, which is the person. So the person whose bank account it is, I can attack them, try to get their credentials. And then I don't need to compromise a whole like bankroll website or do all that work. I just need to send a phishing email and then get that person's information. So while it can be done, it's a lot harder with things that come out now, such as cross-site request forgery tokens and things like multi-factor authentication, and having these and HTTPS, just having a certificate on your website makes those attacks a lot harder. So.
Interesting. Well, I'll sleep a little bit easier at night because I don't know about you, but I don't fall for phishing emails that easily.
Right.
That being said, if anyone remembers your talk from last year, because you are a returning presenter, it's very easy to make a convincing one. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you-
that's very true.
you've heard it here from Wes, security consultant. If it's too good to be true, probably is. Check where that
Mhm.
email came from.
Yeah. Yep,
All right,
exactly.
Well, I'm looking at chat here. I don't see any further questions. If anything comes down the pipeline, I'll forward them to you, and you can answer them however you want: email, message, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Before we go, any parting comments?
No parting comments other than, like I said, if you're interested in any of those, they're at the end of the show or the end of the slideshow. I'll also give that slideshow over to Anthony so he has a copy of it, or just watch the video back. And like I said, I also highly recommend checking out the Games Done Quick Association. Everything they do is for charity. It's a great organization. They do, like I said, 2 things a year, and also checking out that Triforce percent, which was at one of the Games Done Quick events. I try to do my best explaining it, but they do a lot better explaining it in that video as well. It's an hour long, but it's a great watch. So highly recommended. So
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for presenting for a whopping 50 minutes straight. I think you held the record for the longest talk given. So much for speed running. That being said, this is Digital Inclusion Week. This is not the last talk. We have one more before we go. It's going to be tomorrow at 6 p.m. We're going to have Himari Kaneko, or Kaneko Himari. They are a virtual musician, and they're going to be showing everyone the software that they use to be a virtual YouTuber, whatever that means. I don't know. So join me tomorrow and we'll learn more. That's all. So I'm going to go ahead and close down the stream. Thank you so much, Wes, for being here.
Yep. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.